Sustainable farming is all about having happy people and hopeful people.
What the fuck?
So, hello everyone. We're back with a new episode of What the Field, which is a podcast by Crowd Farming, where we get to interview interesting people about all things surrounding sustainability, farming, and climate. So today we're joined by Béla Janovich. Bela, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Great. So, Béla, we've chatted already a bit before this recording, and the main thing that we realized was that there were so many different topics we could talk about. And so we want to talk about your estate, the Jankovic-Bertok estate, about your relationship with common land, your Agrovir project, your time with Antera Capital, the whole thing. So to try and fit everything into this short 1 hour time slot that we have, I thought we could do go on a sort of journey from the personal to the general, or from the micro to the macro, if that makes sense.
Great, let's do that.
Great. So why don't we start off with a bit of your sort of history and background, so everybody can get an idea of where you're coming from. What has been your general journey before starting your professional career?
Well, I grew up in Holland. I'm half Dutch, half Hungarian. My father actually fought in the revolution in '56 and fled from Hungary. My mother's Dutch. So I grew up in Holland, in the countryside, in nature, and it's actually where my first passion and love for nature also developed in my youth, together with my family being out there. And then I studied electrotechnical engineering in Delft, and basically I took my career from there. As an electrotechnical engineer, I became at the end the CEO of a listed company doing high tech all over the world. So it was a very intense period of time. I did that for 15 years. And I learned a lot of actually very tough business with highs and lows. And it was a great learning school. And that I divested some 15 years ago. And at that moment decided with my family to move to Hungary to explore new careers, new opportunities. Never thought I would move so into agriculture or estate or nature as I am right now since 15 years. But apparently it had to be this way. So first I looked into back in high tech and different opportunities there, but nothing really resonated properly. And then when I had some attention to our farm, and actually this estate that I operate right now, that is already a longer history, because in the early 90s, when it was able again for Hungarian families like ours to come back properly, and while the old estate was not possible to retrieve or to get back or to buy back. Well, we had a look around and what's more out there, and we found this beautiful spot here. We are here since 27 years. And so what I said in some 15 years ago, when I had the opportunity, I looked at this estate and I thought, have a deeper dive in there. There were some challenges, and basically the rest is history. I lost my heart here at the estate, and since then I'm very much involved in running the estate, agriculture, forestry, all the bits we will be talking about, and the extended activities I added after that.
Amazing. And so can you maybe paint us a picture of what the estate looks like, of what you're working on it? Because you're implementing, like you said, some regenerative agriculture practices, some agroforestry practices. If one of our listeners were to sort of picture what it might be like to walk around your farm, what images would they have?
Well, maybe it's good to know that when we looked for some place here in Hungary, we were not farmers then. We only looked at the beauty of nature. So that's also where we arrived. So it's the rolling hills with lots of creeks and little rivers and forest patches. So it's a mosaic landscape, which is beautiful and also very fitting for how I farm it by now. So when I started 15 years ago, I needed to learn the basics, the ropes. It was a very intense time because we had a lot of turnover in personnel. So I first had to learn to farm in the old conventional way. And that was hard enough already. And then after 5-6 years, by building up a great team and try to get a hang of it, I realized this is not enough. If we continue in this old way and conventional farming, then especially since we have hills, you see the erosion taking all the topsoils down. And that was something you could see already. We are here for the family for long term, hopefully for generations to come. And if we continue farming that way, with losing topsoil that fast, well, you could guess maybe 50 years more, maybe 100 years more, I don't know, but for sure it would be ending. So then I went into regenerative farming. This is now around 8 years ago. And right now we have a mixed farm. So we have arable land where we do this regenerative farming. We have forestry, extensive cattle keeping, beautiful Hereford cattle. And then we have crop drying facilities and integration, hunting as well here on the estate. So it's a mixed estate with many different factors there.
You know nothing about farming. You go into farming, you start with what people tell you is farming, that it's what many are used to, conventional farming. You realize that's not the way to go. You need something else because you're seeing a lot of erosion. And how do you find that regenerative agriculture is the answer to you were looking for?
Yes, I was reading a lot. And that's very nice of this industry, very different from the industry I used to come from, or I used to be in electrotechnical engineering, where it's very competitive. What's very nice about farming, it's actually not competitive. So there's a lot of sharing, and also many farmers are quite alone. So it's also very nice to talk to other farmers and how do you do this and how do you do that. So once I knew it should be different, I also reached out to other farmers and I read a lot. And in this way, they're very open. So a lot of sharing was done. Actually, through my whole farming journey, I was very much helped by other farmers who are ahead of me, sharing that wisdom. So that's a very positive point of farming. So yes, I read a lot, and I thought it made sense to, and there's maybe a lot of regenerative farming. It makes sense now. It's about the health of the ecosystem. It's the health of your people, of your land. It makes all the sense in the world. How you implement it, that's always always a big question, and that's a journey. But the basic principles of it made very quickly all the sense to me.
And what did the transition look like for you? Was it like a difficult time, or was it sort of exciting? Were you able to see results quite quickly, or what did that transition from conventional to in the process of regenerating look like?
Yeah, it was in the beginning quite daunting because with my agronomist together, my team together, we suddenly have to make a whole different plan. As okay, sounds good, but what will come out of it? So it was daunting at the beginning. We had the great support of it's called an ecological scheme here in Hungary, where we got financial support to make this transition, which is very positive. So it was you can imagine quite a kind of menu you can choose from, what kind of farming practices you want to choose to in this direction. We chose 10, 15 different ones. And based on that, we got this support system and from the Hungarian state. And with that, of course, we got extra security that financially, at least, we could overcome this kind of transition. And that is also what happened. Already within 1 or 2 years, you could see, we do the typical things, no till anymore. So we don't plow the land, cover crops wherever possible. So there's never any barren soil, or as limited as possible. Very extensive crop rotation. Instead of 4 crops that we had in the past, or maybe 5, we do 15 different crops now, which is daunting because you have to look after 15 different things instead of 4 things. And then, of course, cattle. We have extensive cattle. We already had that before, but we also extended the cattle grazing on the cover crops, for example. That was extension to that. And the minimum use of any chemical fertilizers or any other chemicals. And that part has more to do with precision farming, to be honest. I think there a lot of tech has to come in to do that well. So these are the principles that we implemented some 8 years ago. And actually within, I would say, the first year, I thought still, we really have to see where this is going. But by the second year, I was really convinced that this was the way to go. And also to add to that, we turned 1/4 of our arable land into alfalfa, which is a standing crop for 4, 5, 6 years, and very good for the soil. It has a possibility in a symbiotic relation with microbiomes to bind nitrogen. So that was also a big change in what we're doing and how to go about it alfalfa. How can you make a revenue stream out of that? So there are many questions popping up, but so far so good. We're very happy with it, and you see the result.
That's so inspiring. And just very quickly, it's funny to listen to you speak about all this now. It becomes quite difficult to imagine you in an environment of like tech and engineering and all of this kind of corporate world. Is there anything from what I seem to feel is like a bit of a past life that has come into this, that has been useful to you in your new life of regenerative farming? Or do you feel like it's quite separate?
Actually, it's a lot of things I learned there. Of course, nothing about farming, but a lot about people and a lot about how to lead and a lot about actually also how to put the checks and balances right. Because at the end, the risk is it becomes all very fuzzy now, and you try a lot of things, and with people who get insecure about it, where are the finances heading, and all those elements. Of course, I had a lot of experience in my previous career, and that I apply. And sometimes I have the feeling I over apply it in the checks and balances, because, of course, running a listed firm in the past, you need to have many checks and balances. But it works. So yes, that part I take along. Of course, the deep knowledge about nature, about agronomy, about forestry, I don't have. And for that, I have a fantastic team with very capable people who bring in that knowledge. So together, we make it happen.
And that was going to be my next question. How was the transition of the kind of the mentality of these people that maybe were used to working in a different way to regenerative agriculture, or did you have to change teams altogether?
Yeah. When I arrived and took over this farm, at least the running of the farm, 15 years ago, I had, for different reasons, to change the team big time. I had to let go around 80% of the people and hire new again. And then I only hired, for all the good reasons, only very young people, so in their early 20s. And that was a blessing also on many levels, also because, of course, they had less baggage from the past. And with the shift we made then 8 years later, completely into regenerative farming, that was actually surprisingly easy for them to convince that. And not only surprising, actually, it's very logical, because everybody would love to work in a much better surrounding where health is the center of what you're doing, and not necessarily maximum yield. And I have to say that was embraced very quickly. Of course, every change, people get a bit concerned. Will it come out? And there is also the culture very important. What I try to build a culture is where it's completely okay to fail. If something goes wrong, if nothing goes wrong, we don't take enough risk. If something goes wrong, that is okay. The only thing you should do when something goes wrong is to be open about it, be transparent about it. Don't try to hide it away. Be honest about it, and let's discuss what was the reason, what can we learn of that, and how can we do this differently. And this is at the core, I think, of our culture, and therefore, I think change is also, properly embraced so far.
It is said that the farming industry, it's super risk averse, and it's understandable because you see kind of cycles of 1 year. If something goes wrong, maybe you don't notice until 1 year later when it's time to harvest and it's already too late. So it's understandable, but it's true that if we want a transition, we need to try things and see if they work. So it's complicated, but it's cool that there's some people that can take those risks, and some farms that are kind of leading the way to show, okay, I tried this and it worked, now you guys can follow. So I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, and also I have no baggage of any economic practices from the past or from generations before me. I can so imagine if you are fourth, fifth generation at the farm, and your father did it or your parents did it the same way, and before that, it must be also kind of a baggage to throw that off. And luckily, I didn't have that, so it was very In that sense, much easier, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe change it's easier when you have like shorter track record. Yeah. And do you think you're going to be able to get rid of synthetic pesticides, fertilizers soon or at some point? Or is it something that you will need in small doses for the rest of the farm's life?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Also, that's a journey. I would love to, obviously. The other side, I'm an engineer enough to want to use technology, uh, and how I see it, it's more like a weaning off. I I also don't much believe in a complete cold turkey approach. That if you overused and over applied, and then from one year to the other completely quit with that, um, I don't think it's even good, and I don't think it's needed. I think it's for several reasons. If you wean it off over 5 or 7 years, as we did, because now we only use a fraction as we used before, then of course the transition is much more smooth, and at the end you get also a great result. That's one. Secondly, I think at the end, what would be the ideal situation? That at every molecule that you apply has its function. And of course, right now that is completely not the case. We try to apply now variable rate, or we do apply variable rate, and we try, of course, that nothing runs off and everything gets applied in the right way. But we are still far off of the ideal situation. So my estimate is that maybe in 10 years' time, we again use a fraction that we use right now, much more biological, which is also a challenge because biological, the efficiency of that, and we try a lot, but it is very different compared to synthetic. But this is the direction to go. I think the products will get better. We get also less toolbox of chemicals in Europe, which I think is totally logical. With the carrot and the stick, we get to the right direction. But I don't believe in a cold turkey approach. I don't think it's even needed.
That's so interesting. That's like a new approach. How long would you say the ideal transition should last? I guess it depends of the farm and of the context.
Yeah, all these things depend on the farm. I already shared that we are in a more nature mosaic landscape. So for me, it's all very much more natural to do this. Biodiversity is key here. The water management, the soil health is for everybody key. So if you have a very rich soil somewhere, which is meant almost for maximum production, that's a different story. That the transition there would likely be different. We are now 8 years in the journey. I have the feeling we are halfway. I think another 8 years, and maybe then I say again we are halfway. It is the beauty of it, and also the challenge of it. It's very different from engineering. It's an open system. That's one. And secondly, we know so little. I mean, from my background, from my previous career, where you design a high-tech product, you know every electron moving through the system, where it ends, and if you don't, then you are basically having a problem. And in farming, it is unbelievable to me, unimaginable how little we really know about the natural systems. And of course, we do our best and we try, and we're better every year and every day. But this sheer fact how little we know about the soil and how the soil really works, and what I understood that only a fraction of the yeast is even known to it. So we only learning this now, and we are farming for 10,000 years. I think lots of knowledge was lost, of course, thanks to the Green Revolution, but even then. So I'm fascinated by the combination on one side, having high tech applied on that, data, we come to that as well, understanding really, and having actually a digital twin of nature is a big thing that will never happen, I think, but to really understand that on tech, and also understand much more from the past, where, of course, before the Green Revolution, these practices that we are now implementing were mainstream. So so I think we will never be ready, never be done, and I think that's only maybe also not so bad.
And I just have one more question for this farming stage. That it's when you were undergoing the transition, what are some things that changed in the farm that really amazed you, or that made you glad of starting this journey?
Yeah, actually many things. What is great is just what you see. So within 1 or 2 years, what you see is just much more beautiful and healthy, and the biodiversity, even if you don't measure it scientifically, it just gets more beautiful. And secondly, what's amazing is so much more fun. It is really that if you can work with a team like that, that you mainly look at the health of your estate instead of maximum yield or whatever. It's good for the team. It's good for the team spirit. Everybody is enthusiastic to start the day, to make something out of it. So maybe these are the two main takeaways. And maybe the other takeaway is that it can also be done by staying profitable. And I'm happy with that, because I think that is one of the foundations at the end for the long term. You have to be profitable, otherwise it's getting very challenging.
Great. Well, I think one of the other topics that I wanted to talk to you about, Béla, was also your role at Common Land and just what kind of Common Land is and the project. I think it's super interesting. It's a super interesting organization, especially for people like us who are interested in that sort of thing. Could you actually just start off maybe by explaining what Common Land is? What's the mission of the organization and your link to it for our listeners who maybe haven't heard of the name before?
Yeah, great. Common Land is focusing on large-scale landscape restoration. And why is that so needed? Because approximately 1/3 of our entire land mass is degraded, so about 3 billion hectares. And to change that, it is possible to change a good part of that and to restore that part again. And the Common Land has the goal to be instrumental in helping to restore around 100 million hectares till 2040. And in order to do that, we are active right now in over 20 countries. And especially we empower and we engage with the local communities who want to restore their landscape. And I also say landscape because we have a very much landscape approach. And that means that you don't look at a project or at a species or at a time frame. We have a landscape approach, and a landscape is basically an ecosystem. An ecosystem can be 100,000 hectares, a few million hectares. Of course, it should be having logical borders with mountain ridges or rivers. And we look at the entire landscape. And of course, there are many stakeholders in that landscape. What we focus on is on 4 returns, as we call it. Because all degraded landscapes have something in common. It's basically there's no social cohesion anymore. There is no, the nature goes down. There's no financial returns anymore. And all those 3 result in that basically there's no hope anymore. And hope is incredibly important for, of course, people to stay. If there's no hope, people are leaving. So these are the indicators for a degraded landscape. And we try to turn it around and also make it measurable. That we call this the 4 returns approach. That means returns of financial capital has to be positive over time. Return of social capital, the people, basically that's the social capital, that has to be positive over time. Return of natural capital, and those 3 things result in the return of hope. So this is the framework how we can help, and how we do that. We often it's like that in a landscape that is degraded, there's already stakeholders who want to change that, but they are part of the system, and they are often not the majority. And we come in to be an independent, it's an NGO, so we come in as an independent party, and we help the whole stakeholder process from the very beginning, and to engage all these other stakeholders with something called the Theory U approach. It's a stakeholder management approach with the outcome that there is a landscape plan. So this takes 1 or 2 years, and there is a plan where these 4 returns are agreed upon. What are the indicators? We also help with the zoning, or we support with the zoning. So we, with the whole landscape, there will be a natural zone which is completely dedicated to nature. There's an economic zone because people have to work somewhere, and there is in between a combined zone that is more for regenerative agriculture or less intensive use. And this is all very long term. So this is for 20 years, this plan. So once this plan, every stakeholder is aligned. I think this is in anything you do, the alignment is so incredibly crucial. And when you have a plan going forward for 20 years with proper indicators, then suddenly you have something that can also be funded. And suddenly you can go to funders and say, okay, I want to, part of my plan is to reforest that mountain ridge. It's part of a bigger holistic plan. So would you please be willing to support us in that? So then suddenly a next phase can happen. So we help in that whole process, which I just described, and we do that since 10 years. It's working. That's a good part of it. It's working. We have proof, and it's quite unique, I think, that from the ground up, when we are supporting these landscapes, that we see incredibly impressive results. And I travel once in a while to these landscapes as well, and I'm most taken by the energy that you get from the people who are involved, and indeed the energy is maybe the same as hope. If you have positive energy, then there is hope, and hope is the main indicator for the proper development of a landscape to something healthy. So that's what we're doing with Commonland.
Yeah. That's super interesting, because I think the whole purpose of not the whole purpose maybe, but one of the big impacts of regenerative agriculture is that what you were saying, that people are happier, that they like working more, that it's healthier. And I think these 4 returns, it's kind of schematizes it really, really well. And I was going to ask, who's your counterpart in these projects? Like, who is on the ground, and how do you select the areas where you want to work? Is it global? Is it European? How does it work?
Yes, we are working in clusters. So we have an Africa cluster, and we have a European cluster. So we have several clusters in the world where we're doing this, because it is also important to create a cohesion between landscapes together, because there's a lot of interaction and learning possible within such a cluster. Well, basically what we are doing, we're looking, of course, where are degraded landscapes. No, you don't have to look that far for that. And B, where is already an initiative. We don't start somewhere where there is not already a good initiative on the ground. And then we have a process to help those stage by stage. We first have a first discussion. We talk with the people who have that initiative, and we see what are the common grounds, and then we take it further and further depending on the progress of that. So we are actively scouting in the world for that. And maybe I can give you an example. We support a landscape in Spain, in the Altiplano. It's between Murcia and Valencia. Beautiful area. It's higher lands, and a lot of almond trees are planted there. 60 years ago, and there already 10 years ago, we came in touch with a group of farmers who wanted to do it differently, and you can almost say the rest is history. There are now hundreds of farmers united, but not only that, also local companies, local politicians. So everybody who is actually involved in the landscape is a stakeholder. And with those, we support to bring that to the next level, as I described. And the beauty now is that this is such a great example where it worked so well. This will now be extended all over the Iberian Peninsula. The same concept, but then as a kind of cluster, where already I think 12 different landscapes are identified. And I think then it really works well, because there's so much to learn from each other. That's an example how success looks like.
And the cherry on the cake is that they sell through crowd farming. These almonds can be found in crowd farming, so that's...
Yes, absolutely. Whole world.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that one of the examples? Because I'm a big fan of this fourth return idea. Is there one project that you felt particularly connected with that has given you that sense of hope? Maybe it's the Spanish one that you're mentioning, or is there anyone that you personally felt particularly connected with?
Yes, and it's of course hard to pick out one, because to turn it around, I think if there's not this drive of positiveness and hope, then basically something is wrong, and then we have to dig deeper. Of course, this happens, and then you have to dig deeper. What is the root cause, and how can we do it differently, and still have a holistic view of the entire thing? But also, I've just been in Australia to visit our partners there. Totally taken what there's so much happening out there, and there are so many people I have such respect for who give their lives to really make a difference, and often very much fighting alone or in a very small group. And those people we try to reach and to empower, and that is, like you said, it's always positive. So I don't have a specific favorite. I'm just always taken by the energy that you feel, and that really touches you.
It's like the power of the collective. So rather than having one that's particularly influenced you, it's the fact that there are so many different ones that have the same effect.
Absolutely. And once, I have to say, once in Spain, there was a lunch organized when we were there with several others, and we were there in the orchard with 60 other farmers and we had a lunch. Now the atmosphere and the drive and the fun and yeah, indeed the hope was amazing. So only for that you would already do it, for these kind of lunches.
That could also be Spanish culture, because Spanish people do love a nice long lunch in the countryside.
That helps for sure. But I also had great lunches at the other places. But yes, for sure.
I've heard about this lunch from the farmers. They remember it with great great memories.
Oh, happy to hear that. No, it was a great time.
And Bela, do you support these landscapes and this kind of grassroots initiatives? You support them with guidance, I guess, but also with economic support. If I can ask, where does the money come from to support common land? Is it private? Is it, or how does it work?
It is from several sources. One of the main founders that had made it all possible 10 years ago is still very much on board and incredibly engaged. It is the Come On Foundation, and they are funding the majority of all the overhead costs, or actually all the overhead costs. It's the office in Amsterdam of 35 people, and the basic support in several landscapes. And it was unbelievable, the vision of that team and the founder, that it was possible to get to this stage. We are more and more, since we can show successes, we are more and more successful to engage other funders, and that's also happening, mainly from family offices. So often high net worth individuals who want to do good and see that landscape restoration is incredibly important. That is more on the philanthropic side. Once you have a landscape plan, there's much more specific what can happen in the landscape. A whole other possibilities open up for funding. I think bank loans, we are still far from that. But for sure, other than philanthropic money, for example, companies who want to support. We have good examples in the landscape where there is a brewery downstream, and for them it's important that the water is properly collected and filtered and there at all. And they, for example, funded the reforestation against the mountain hill. So that is then in the landscape, you get a different possibilities for funding. Then typically, like in any NGO, the overhead is the most difficult to fund, and luckily we are very well secured in that aspect.
That's super interesting, kind of the importance of that kind of visionary person that says, I'm going to invest on this and I'm going to be the first one, and then when I prove this works, other people will come and support it. But we have to recognize the importance of that initial step. Yeah.
I totally agree, and I'm at all with that, because you have to have such a vision and belief, and long-term vision especially. So yeah, we are blessed with that. it's great to have them on board.
And seeing that more and more people start to share your vision and get convinced by these ideas is super inspiring. I mean, we see it quite a lot just with like regenerative agriculture. More and more people getting involved, more and more people who are maybe skeptical at the beginning are becoming more interested. This snowball effect is like also such a big source of hope, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and you see that is, to be honest, I joined Common Land around 8 years ago, and I learned a lot. I still learn every day, but especially in the beginning about the whole landscape approach. It's actually so logical, but it not. It used to be not very much mainstream. Now it becomes more and more so. But if you look at something holistically, which I think we can all agree that is the healthiest way to do, then it's actually no other way than looking at the landscape level as well, because there everything comes together physically as well, and that becomes more and more mainstream. And I think that, I think that Common Land helped in that kind of journey to make that more on the forefront.
I guess we're wired to do well or we're used to. Maybe we're wired to collaborate, but recently we're used to looking at things from our individual lens, and to have a landscape approach involves cooperating with people that do very different things than the ones you do. So I think that's a super interesting approach that makes people collaborate that normally maybe wouldn't to restore a whole landscape. And Bela, what about success? Like, how do you measure these 4 returns? Is there some kind of basic metrics that you apply to all landscapes, or is it depending on the state of each landscape? How do you do this?
Yeah, that is something we continue to develop all the time, you can imagine. So there was 4 returns we have for each landscape. We have goals for that, and also I give you an example. For example, social return is how many jobs you can create. A return of hope is actually, I look at it in the same way in our village, how many young families come to your area instead of leaving it. So these are some logical indicators, and for each landscape we help the local team to create them and to set them and to follow them. And actually we are right now in the process to make a kind of overall indicators for that on those 4 returns. Because indeed each landscape is different, so therefore you have also different indicators for each landscape. But it's incredibly important to measure and to really show the proof that this is working, which we can on the landscape level. And we are building now up the structure to bring it all together to one set of indicators for all over the landscapes that we are engaged in. But it's a continuous process, and you can imagine how difficult it is. It's always difficult, even on farm level, is to measure. How do you measure? What are really the criteria? It's often an open system, so it's a real challenge, and often also a lot of extra work, because you just want to go out and you want to do, and not everybody's waiting to collect the data, and it's often not the primary impulse people work on. It's a big challenge, but it's incredibly important, and we support the landscapes with this.
And that kind of brings me to the other point that I wanted to talk to you about as well, which is AgroVir. Do you use, because obviously AgroVir, I'm sure you'll tell us now a bit what it's about, but there are tools that exist, technological tools that exist to sort of facilitate this data collection, this measuring of the results and of the impact of these initiatives, right? Do you think those are good solutions to sort of speed up that process and to not take up so much time for the people who actually just want to get stuff done?
Yes. Well, we need a bit more time. The journey, I say we're halfway, and maybe in 10 years' time, I say again we're halfway.
We'll do another podcast in like 8 years and ask you these same questions to see your answer.
We'll see by then. No, when I took over the farm management, I realized that we didn't have the proper tools in place to run the farm management software. And with my previous career, I was very much used to that, to have very good ERP software and know exactly which semiconductor was where. And then I found a great software company in Hungary that actually exactly did what I was expecting it to do. That is Agrovir, and I used that software 2-3 years, and then I also became an investor in that. And basically, Agrovir is a digital twin of the farm. I won't bore you with all the details, but this is from warehousing to everything that's happening on the field. Every pass that you're doing is being registered, and then of course everything that's going over the weigh bridge into the silos and sold. So everything related to labor, to machines, to land, and all the inputs and outputs are completely tracked there. Now that's great. That's already a great start. You have to do this either or very well and very precise, or rather forget the whole thing, because if this is halfway, it makes no sense whatsoever. And to do it well, you have to be very disciplined, and of course, it's a challenge for all of us, I think. But we do this every morning. What has been done the evening before? It's a whole process. It takes half an hour. Nothing special, but you have to do it. And indeed, more and more is being fed straight from the tractors. We have a connection with John Deere and CNH directly from the tractors being fed into the software. But also there, often these data are silos, and to really have the complete overview, we are not there yet. So a lot of manual labor is still needed. And you can imagine this is then a perfect copy or digital twin of all the arable lands. But then we have forest and nature areas and all stuff that is not covered by this software. And how do you do that? So if you look at a more holistic way, you need a much wider system that is communicating with these specialist systems. Now we are not there yet. We are working on it, and we have some tools. But let's say a digital twin of the entire ecosystem, not at all. So we're working on that. But I think we're getting there. There's a lot of new tech from remote sensing. It's getting better and better. There's a lot of this, like I explained, the data coming from tractors. But to make it a whole overview that is usable and effective for following goals or KPIs, still a bit of work to do.
Okay, something to aspire to.
Yes, exactly.
That's amazing. I think it's so cool because we've just talked about so many different blocks and all in the same person. It's so crazy that you have so much experience in engineering and in tech, and then in farming and on the ground work, in management of people and in NGOs. It's such a broad landscape of stuff that you've been up to. Do you think that do you have one that's a favorite actually? Was there one thing that you feel particularly was more fun or more in line with your interests?
That's a good question. My favorite, to be honest, my favorite is to really see positive development and help, and help with health. I think that is what I aspire most. And of course, that's an overarching. You can do that for many different industries. So a more specific answer, I have to say, at the farm, being outside, to work with my team, the fields. I have to say that's by far my favorite. And really see and feel it and hear it and smell it. That's amazing. And I wish we're actually talking about health for so many more people to. And of course, everybody's different, so maybe I shouldn't even say that. But to have this connection with nature gives me so much, and I see also around me. And I think many of us have lost that connection with nature. I wish that also for others, because I feel very, very, very happy with that. Yeah.
I'm not surprised at all by that answer. I feel like it's the one I would have expected.
Bela, and after going back to the farm, after you produce this with so much love and taking care that it's in a healthy ecosystem, do you worry about how this is sold? Or your job is done producing it and selling it at some price? Because I know from the Altiplano that we were speaking, it's not only through crowd farming that they sell their produce, but I know that they place it in local businesses, in hotels, in restaurants, and they do really nice job at kind of creating the awareness on how this was produced. So is this something that you you also like to take part on. How do we make people aware of that this is a different product? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that is still, I'm very concerned about that. There, a real systemic change needs to happen. And there could be several pathways to get there. But indeed, with there's so many also within the landscapes that Commonland is involved. There's so many who really, with great love and care and attention, create products that become commodities and being milled over and distributed. And how to make that connection to the end consumer that can really appreciate and value as well what is done, and at the end also pay accordingly. That is a very tough challenge that has been shown also, for example, in of course the organic products. That market is growing, but very slowly in the supermarket. So the moment somebody stands out there and buys something, a consumer, it's often this is not part of the thinking process. We all know that, and how to change that. That's a big challenge, and I try to be part of that. So we do more and more niche products. So we sell directly to, for example, we make sunflower seeds that we sell to a snack company that well, luckily Healthy Snacks, that sells those sunflowers in packages. So to have connection there, our cattle, our Hereford cattle, also that meat that is only grass fed. But it is incredible. It's a very big challenge to get there, and this systemic change is a big challenge. In Europe, I think you see right now that the big companies like the big FMCG companies like Nestlé and Unilever, they're starting to move into their direction. I think also very much driven by the whole reporting that is being required, of course, since recent. And that might also be a very important driver. You can question if that's, nobody likes greenwashing, and I don't say they're doing that, but nevertheless, we are moving that direction. I think the aim is there to have half of the purchased goods being sourced from regenerative farming.
Unfortunately, our conversation had to come to an unexpected end because of some technical issues we had with our podcast recording platform. So we lost the last few minutes of the podcast, but we thought it would be such a shame not to share the wonderful conversation we had with Bela up to this point. So, as some of you may know, we always finish the podcast with the same 2 questions, and we wanted to make sure that we included them in this episode too. So we asked Bela what book or podcast or film he would recommend to you all, and he shared with us that his choice was The Invention of Nature by Andrea Wolf, and he described it as such a gripping story about Alexander von Humboldt's journeys and its massive contribution to the understanding of the natural world and ecology. So I think that's a great recommendation for all of us. And for our second question of what's one thing that makes you think, what the fuck, since starting on the regenerative journey, and Bela shared that, in essence, how limited our scientific knowledge still is of the soil, and with that, how little we know to adapt that knowledge in practical ways to farm with nature. But he ended on a positive note that we are making progress step by step. So we apologise again for this unexpected ending, but we know better than most that sometimes things don't go exactly as we plan, and we learn to adapt and try to make the most of the situation. We hope you still enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.